Roland Rotz, Dr. Roland Rotz, is a psychologist in the Carpinteria area, and he has the Lifespan Development Center. He's a nationally renowned psychologist in the field of ADD, particularly adult. He's one of the few who focuses on adult ADD, but also he's an expert in child ADD. And he has, over the past 15 years, been establishing effective ways of assessing this and of treating these types of things, along with being a wonderful person and a wonderful speaker and a teacher. He's taught at both Antioch and Pacifica, and he's very active in the community. He's an active board member for the Carpinteria Chamber of Commerce and an overall wonderful person. So allow me to introduce Dr. Roland Rotz.
Thank you, Juliet. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm so pleased that all of you stayed for the grand finale. Really. So it was wonderful because in the context that the committee for the career day asked if I would talk about community and employment. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting combination. You know, I do a little of both, and so let's see how we can make this make sense. So, in the next 15 minutes, I want to give you a bit of a journey that I've gone through, and give you an idea about how someone survives in this field of private practice. It actually dates back about 30 years ago when I was on top of the world. I had just finished my degree, my PhD. I had just passed the licensing exam, and that's a point in time when you absolutely feel like you own it, right? And at that time, with my psychoanalytic training, it was assumed that you would walk out, put up your shingle, and you would charge your $100 an hour, and insurance would pay 80 of that, predictably forever, and the client would pay 20. So that was 1989. What you need to know is that Charter Hospital began out of Tennessee, and their other place was San Diego, where I was just getting ready to open my practice. They were the first company to actually experiment with this thing called managed care. Let's see if we can make this more affordable for everyone, right? And so from that point forward, managed care came to San Diego first and then spread quickly throughout the country and changed how everyone did practice. People were scrambling to get on insurance panels, and I would say that the income stream was never the same for psychologists. It was dramatically revised. So 30 years later, how is it that I still stand here doing private practice? By their standards, they would say that I'm a dinosaur, right? You're left over from another era, and we just don't do that anymore. Right now, the push is to join an agency, join in with other health agencies and participate in kind of a group. We were talking earlier today about one such agency where you go in and you possibly may see a behavioral specialist for 15 minutes. And that becomes a real challenge to try to do that therapy hour in 15 minutes. So what I really appreciate about a career fair like this is that what it does is it draws you into that whole environment of actually making a choice. It's like get up, get out, and begin to actively seek out what it is you want. To me, that's one of the biggest parts of what's allowed my change to occur. When I do these career fairs for middle school students, one of the pieces of research that I came across was that for those middle school students who graduate from college, like right now, at the point, when they advance and graduate from college, 2/3 of the jobs that they see now will be gone. That's how our industry is changing, and it's changing so rapidly. So the move is not to work towards, I want that job. It's how do you prepare yourself to be employable, right? And what do you look for? So that has a lot to do with finding your dream and staying with it. Today, we've heard about how important it is to think out of the box, how to be more creative. It's a huge part of it. So I wanted to give you some of the possibilities that I've noticed, certainly over my 30 years of doing this, but just as I gather more information. One possibility is even with a PhD, you can still work as a psychological assistant to somebody else who's licensed. And the goal would be to advance your training in a specific area. Right now, I have 2 psychological assistants who are learning psychological testing. They wanted more experience, more actual hands-on. It becomes a lucrative piece if you're out there trying to do work in this world. Another one is to extend your training by studying neuropsychology and kind of really pushing that limit. And when you do that, you open up a whole other world. Right now, there's a big demand for people trained and skilled at advancing executive functions. And that's a very specific piece of it. Another career that I was just a breath away from was as a civil servant for the military, assessing submariners. And that's something that opens up from time to time. You're not joining the military, although that's a whole other career as well, but you're actually working as a civil servant and as a psychologist for the military. There's a big push on right now also for psychologists who have time on their hands to spend several months at a time overseas for the military, working to interview young men and women who are coming back from war-torn areas and addressing the PTSD. So that's a whole other area. Another area that I see very active is consulting in organizations. I worked at one point as an employee assistance service provider, and basically we had a 3 to 5 session model, and it was to help and then refer out. And that becomes a powerful way that a lot of companies facilitate that. Another area is the whole world of mediation and arbitration. Right now, anyone, you don't have to have any kind of experience or practice in this at all, can go down and get training as a mediator. And then you sit and you work with 2 people and you've got basic skills. Imagine applying the skills that you have to that. And it's also a paid position. So that becomes another one that can be really helpful. Some folks actually move into the whole realm of being a forensic psychologist. That's studying, analyzing, and then you present in court to present your findings that the court has requested. I've done work in hospitals doing cancer support groups as just another thing to facilitate and help people through. So that's a whole other area as well. One of those that is not my first love is those industrial organizational psychologists who are actively busy out there working for corporations. There's one prerequisite. You gotta love stats. So that's something to keep in mind. One of my classmates back at CSPP created a career out of writing and videotaping and editing personal histories. So imagine understanding that from their own personal mythology. Storytelling has been an amazing part of this whole community folklore, and I think understanding kind of like archetypal influences is a powerful workshop, for example, to help people understand, oh, there are themes out there that actually people make sense of and know about. So I think that's another big part of it. Things like where you take your skill set and you offer workshops around somatic therapy, movement, art. These are all things that I know the Art Center in Carpinteria is excited about bringing to the public and providing a way for people to interact with knowledgeable folks. So that becomes a huge piece of it. And then finally, when we talk about careers, this is just a short list here, but there many people are moving into the arena of school psychologists. I mean, there's a big need for that. And also, we're seeing a lot of effort in finding more who will be willing to teach and do research, more who will be willing to become, that professor at the university. So it's a whole other array. Probably one of the interesting research areas that I came across was a young man who had his PhD and was actively involved working for Microsoft, and he played video games all day. And so, of course, he's analyzing what will keep your attention focused on that game. And I'm thinking, oh, that's my arch enemy. But that's an important piece. So that's that element of careers. Okay, but now let me shift a little bit and talk about the notion of community, because I think that's the piece that I certainly have embraced. And at one point in my career, when I moved out of San Diego up into the Carpinteria area, and my wife and I talked about it as getting small, because San Diego got way too big, and just love this area. But really, it was recognizing that you can't operate just as a clinical psychologist in private practice. You become a part of a community. And so that became a huge piece of that. Joining a community means reaching out beyond the closed door of your practice. You move beyond what I call the default life, just to sit back and let it come to me, right? To finding choice. It's finding your own creation. I think that means waking up every day with an action plan to be interested and interesting. So where do we begin? You create volunteers. You create opportunities by volunteering. Red Cross disaster preparedness, they always are looking for skilled clinicians to come in. They do a short training and you're in their pool. By the way, they'll send you to Timbuktu and pay you $10 a week and feed you and clothe you. But you will be doing an amazing piece of work. So if you're not busy, it's a great strategy, okay? The other thing that I've done is I became pretty quickly involved with the Chamber of Commerce. Now you think, I'm not really looking for referrals from the Chamber of Commerce, but why would you do that? Well, it is about creating a voice for health and wellness. And so in our chamber in Carpinteria, we have a whole subsection about health and wellness that involves so many different folks. And that becomes a big part of what brings people, into that community. I think volunteering on the board has really brought me into the whole business community as well. And you make an enormous number of contacts. I quickly started contributing articles to my local newspaper there. Now people do that as a blog. There are all kinds of ways you can do that, but it's another way of kind of joining into that wonderful community. I joined the Rotary Club. I wanted to salute a flag every once in a while. I mean, when was the last time you said, I pledge allegiance? Right? And it became an important part for me. So in joining the Rotary Club of Carpinteria, shortly after, there was an opportunity that came up where a bunch of us gathered together and created a country rock band that we formed. And I was one of the singers for that group. A couple of years later, we were playing to a large crowd at the Avocado Festival. And it was a Friday evening, and what I was told later is my wife was standing out there and listening, everybody's dancing, having fun, and she suddenly hears this child's voice, very loud over the noise of the crowd, saying, "Look, Mommy, that's my therapist." Yeah. Sometimes dual relationships are inevitable in small communities. I think it's important that you join your local psychological association. and volunteer. As you do, it is the fastest way to meet like-minded colleagues. Start a free support group. I've done support groups here in Santa Barbara for ADHD, kind of lifespan issues, and also for clutter hoarding. I mean, again, you see how things kind of lead you into different areas of life. And they were powerful groups, and they're still needed once a month. It's easy to do. You do it for an hour and a half. And the value of having somebody who's trained there versus just peer-led is huge. You don't do it for referrals, and it's amazing how many referrals come just through the back door. People hear about you, oh, you're doing this, that kind of thing. So that becomes an important piece of the puzzle. Find your local adult ed program. When I moved here in '98, one of the first things I did is I went to City College Adult Ed, and I said, oh, you have any interest in having ADHD talks? Yes. I've been doing a talk every semester since '88, and have never had one class not work. Now we don't go by that anymore. Like, if you can have 5 people if you want, but it's always 20 to 30 people, and they're not the same people. So that becomes an important way of actually, being active and getting involved. If you're in this position of wanting to join a community, offer to speak to service clubs. Take something that's focused, that you can talk to for 15, 20 minutes, and make it upbeat and interesting. I know my Rotary Club looks for that. Do workshops in your area of interest. Somebody was talking earlier about they're a somatic therapist. Are you kidding? No one knows what that means except us. Right? And so it becomes a valuable thing in a way to have someone kind of come and inform you, and then, wait, man, that might apply to me. Write a journal article. What that does is that gives you, some support from that community in a much larger way, but even better, write a book. I wrote a little book called Fidget to Focus. Oh my God, it sells more today than it sold when I wrote it 10 years ago. And that was because the research is catching up. Another part of that is one of the things that's a phenomenon today. It used to be that you'd go find a publisher, and then they would accept you or not accept you, and, oh, what am I going to do if they don't accept me? Don't do that anymore. Self-publish, and with print on demand through Amazon, this becomes an easy thing to do. And you own that book, and you own the advertising to it, and it's up to you. How much you want to use it that way. Finally, it's probably a really good idea to have that online presence, right? That website, something out there that kind of informs people. And don't do like I do, where you're way behind on updating it. But that can be a powerful piece for referrals. And I would encourage you, I know LinkedIn were they here today? I saw them on the list, but unfortunately, get on LinkedIn. I made a mistake, and I have 2 profiles on there, and I have over 800 on each one. And these are people, you're not doing that much with it, but what's happening is if somebody sees something that's interesting that you put on there, like you might just show up on Facebook and put something there, you suddenly get lots of notices, and people are looking for that. So it becomes a powerful sub-community. And I know just in talking to them, because of course they're based in Carpinteria, they are like the 7th most active website in the world. So it's huge. You should have a LinkedIn presence. In closing, I'm reading a book right now entitled A Paradise Built in Hell. It's by Rebecca Solnit. It was claimed Book of the Year by New York Times and numerous different organizations. She's challenging our notion that these disasters are kind of seen through Hollywood's viewpoint, where everybody's screaming and running away, and in essence, it's everybody for themselves. Okay, and what she's saying is that her research shows it's exactly the opposite of that. In fact, what happens around disasters is that community forms. People come together, they support each other, they share, they offer space, they provide support back and forth, and everybody brings their best. I think we as psychologists, as counselors, we're primed to respond with leadership in these kinds of situations. We've studied individuals, we've studied communities, and we're ready to support and facilitate the development of the community in the best of times, but also in the worst of times. So, as you consider your career, be active, be bold, take risks, and don't forget to embrace your community. Thank you.